Hi, girls and boys. Glad you could join me today. I have a very special story to share. It's a really old story. I remember someone reading it to me when I was a little girl, and I read this same story to my boys when they were little. And so I thought I would share it with you, and I hope you enjoy it. It's called The Little House. The author and illustrator is Virginia Lee Burton. And this book is a very special book because it has a golden Caldecott medal. So it's a very special book. So I hope you enjoy it. The Little House. And look at the back cover, boys and girls. It shows the changing of times from a car, a trolley car, horse and buggy. And here's how our story begins. Once upon a time, there was a little house way out in the country. She was a pretty little house, and she was strong and well built. The man who built her so well said, "This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren living in her." Isn't she sweet? It's a sweet little house. The little house was very happy. As she sat on the hill and watched the countryside around her, she watched the sun rise in the morning, and she watched the sun set in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little different from the one before, but the little house stayed just the same. It's like I see cows. In the nights, she watched the moon grow from a thin new moon to a full moon, and then back again to a thin old moon. And when there was no moon, she watched the stars. Way off in the distance, she could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city and wondered what it would be like to live there. See those little lights? She's wondering. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days grew longer and the sun warmer, she waited for the first robin to return from the south. She watched the grass turn green. She watched the buds on the trees swell and the apple trees burst into blossom. She watched the children playing in the brook. So it's spring. And there's the little robins coming back. In the long summer days, she sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves and the white daisies cover the hill. She watched the gardens grow, and she watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children playing in the swimming pool. Do you see them, boys and girls? There's the swimming pool. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frosts turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvest gathered and the apples picked. She watched the children going back to school. There they are. They're racing for the buggy. That wagon there. Get to school. In the winter, when the nights were long and the days short, and the countryside covered with snow, she watched the children coasting and skating. Year followed year, the apple trees grew old, and new ones were planted. The children grew up, and went away to the city. And now at night the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. I wonder why they're so close. There's the snow-covered house. Oh, wonder what's going on here. One day, the little house was surprised to see a horseless carriage coming down the winding country road. Pretty soon, there was more of them on the road, and fewer carriages pulled by horses. Pretty soon, along came some surveyors and surveyed a line in front of the little house. Pretty soon, along came a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisies. Then some trucks came and dumped big stones on the road. Then some trucks with little stones. Then some trucks with tar and sand. And finally a steamroller came and rolled it all smooth. And the road was done. So all the daisies are gone. Now there's tons of houses. Now the little house watched the trucks and automobiles going back and forth to the city. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything moved much faster now than before. Look at all those houses, boys and girls. See them all? Lots and lots of houses. More roads were made, and the countryside was divided into lots. More houses and bigger houses, apartment houses and tenement houses, schools, stores, and garages spread over the land and crowded around the little house. No one wanted to live in her and take care of her anymore. She couldn't be sold for gold or silver, so she just stayed there and watched. No one was living in her, boys and girls. How sad. Now it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now the lights of the city were bright and very close, and the street lights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house, and didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Windows are dark. Pretty soon, there were trolley cars going back and forth in front of the little house. They went back and forth all day and part of the night, and everyone seemed to be very busy, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. So there's the trolley car. And there's another one going back and forth. Getting busy. Ooh, it's getting busier. Pretty soon, there was an elevated train going back and forth above the little house. The air was filled with dust and smoke, and the noise was so loud that it shook the little house. Now she couldn't tell when spring came, or summer, or fall, or winter. It all seemed about the same. You see it? She's right down there. She's surrounded. Pretty soon there was a subway going back and forth underneath the little house. She couldn't see it, but she could feel and hear it. People were moving faster and faster. No one noticed the little house anymore. They hurried by without a glance. So there's that subway right underneath the little house. Lots of people. Pretty soon, they tore down the apartment houses and tenement houses around the little house and started digging big cellars, one on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side and 4 stories on the other side. Pretty soon they started building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other side. Wow, big buildings. Now the little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or the stars at night at all because the lights of the city were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. At night she used to dream of the country and the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. The little house was very sad and lonely. Her paint was cracked and dirty. Her windows were broken and her shutters hung crookedly. She looked shabby, though she was just as good a house as ever underneath. Poor little house. Then one fine morning in spring, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who built the little house so well. She saw the shabby little house, but she didn't hurry by. There was something about the little house that made her stop and look again. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl. Only that little house was way out in the country, on a hill covered with daisies and apple trees growing around." They stopped. That's a good thing. They found out it was the very same house, so they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. The movers looked the little house all over and said, "Sure, this house is as good as ever. She's built so well we could move her anywhere." So they jacked up the little house and put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours as they slowly moved her out of the city. Yay! There goes the little house. Where are they taking her, boys and girls? At first, the little house was frightened, but after she got used to it, she rather liked it. She rolled along the big road, and they rolled along the little roads until they were way out in the country. When the little house saw the green grass and heard the birds singing, she didn't feel sad anymore. They went along and along, but they couldn't seem to find just the right place. They tried the little house here, and they tried her there, and finally they saw a little hill in the middle of a field and apple trees growing around. "There," said the great-great-granddaughter. "That's just the place." "Yes, it is," said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on the top of the hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. They found just the right spot, and there's those apple trees. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink. And as the little house settled down on her new foundation, she smiled happily. Once again, she could watch the sun and moon and stars. Once again, she could watch spring and summer and fall and winter come and go. Makes me happy. Once again, she lived in and taken care of. She's so happy, boys and girls. She's all brand new again. Never again would she be curious about the city. Never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her. A new moon was coming up. It was spring, and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. And that is the little house. I hope you enjoyed that, boys and girls. I wanted to, remember I told you that I read it to my son, my boys when they were little? Well, my youngest son, Rudy, was so inspired by that story that he decided he wanted to create his own houses. And so I wanted to share with you a little picture of him, of what he created. And he is actually in the first grade in this picture. Do you see him? This is my son, Rudy. And he created this community of houses. He was so proud of that. And you can do that too. I actually created a little house out of paper bags. And I just took some crayons and I just colored it in. This is supposed to be like brick. And you just fold over the top and you make a like kind of a roof. So you could do that too. You could create your own little house. Now, boys and girls, I know some of you think, well, Mrs. Klobas, I don't live in a house. I live in an apartment. But you know, boys and girls, the dwelling, the structure is not really a home. A home is the people that live inside the dwelling. That is considered a home. And so those are the people that love you and you love them. And they take care of you. And that is considered a special home as well. My home is a very special home too to me. I've lived on it for a long time, and my boys were all here too. They grew up here in this home. And so we take very good care of our home, and I hope you do. I hope you think your home, your house, is as special as the little house. So, bye boys and girls. Have a great day. I miss you all.